back to Cityline. With me, I have someone who is, well, he's kind of our hometown guy. We see him everywhere, but he has been very, very busy lately. And I'm thrilled that he said yes to come Zoom with us and sit down and talk about what has been happening in his world. I'm talking about Jake Fye. He is our state representative for the 27th Legislative District. Welcome, Jake. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Amanda. It's been a long time.
I know. It's been like decades. I mean, we both look different then. We won't go into that, though, shall we?
No, let's pass on that.
That's right. We're passing on that. Jake, we've had many of your constituents on now that you are technically not in session. It doesn't mean you're not busy. And all of them have had very interesting answers to this question. So the question is, what has it been like for you to work remotely this year?
Well, I would say it's a mixed bag. It's, and I think the experience by legislators is subject to really what they do in the legislature and what their circumstances are. So I think mine are different in that I was faced as chair of the transportation budget with about a $1 billion shortfall in our budget that never really went away. The shortfall in the operating budget kind of went away, but people were still buying on Amazon, but they weren't driving to stores. They weren't on the toll facilities. They weren't riding ferries. So I had to work through with our budget committee of Democrats and Republicans to put together a budget that would cut $1 billion. Now, at the end of the day, we were blessed with some of the federal money and that we didn't have to make as dire cuts as we otherwise would have. But a virtual world made it more difficult because we didn't have very good access to our staff. Everything had to be scheduled. And normally during a legislative session, we would my colleague, Representative Barkas, and I would sit in the back of the room and chat and go over things, and you couldn't do that. I had to actually go down to Representative Barkas's business office in Olympia and work from there when we negotiated with the Senate. So I think my circumstances were more difficult than some of the other legislators that didn't have that kind of a set of circumstances. But I mean, on the high side, I think that we got much more testimony from citizens across the state who otherwise don't participate in the process.
Absolutely. And I love how you broke that down into community terms. People were buying on Amazon, but they're not taking public transportation. And that helps us understand why on earth is there $1 billion shortfall? At least one of the reasons why. Did you find, Jake, that this allowed for more opportunities for the public to engage with legislators, or did you find working remotely was more of a barrier for people?
I think it helped with constituents in terms of being able to express themselves, right? On the 1.5 minute snippets in the Senate, it was even a tighter standpoint, timing wise, for maybe 30 seconds. So more people got to put in their words, but I didn't have the face-to-face conversations with constituents that traditionally come down to Olympia to chat and have a more in-depth conversation. So I think there was some benefit to that, but I think the depth of the contact was not as good with constituents, at least constituents from the district. Didn't have a chance to have a back and forth conversation. It was all kind of one way.
Oh, yeah, to be continued, as we would say. So, Jake, one of your top priorities in the legislature has been ensuring a cleaner, more sustainable transportation system for the state. And, Governor Inslee is all over that. How did this year's budget fare for transportation projects when you started already, as you just said, $1 billion shortfall?
So my colleagues and I on the House Transportation, the Democrats, we did about 80 to 90 listening sessions with stakeholders in the interim between the 2020 legislative session, the 2021 legislative session, for purposes of both our budget work, but also potential additional transportation projects and needs. And so we had a pretty good handle on what the consensus was. Part of that really surrounded work that was done during session on carbon, but also it was work that we did to bolster our efforts for women and minority-owned businesses, for more broad capabilities and opportunities for apprenticeships for communities that generally don't get those opportunities. And we were able to do some work in terms of special needs for transportation for folks who need special transportation services to get to medical appointments, a little bit more money for complete streets for sidewalks, and a little bit more money for grants to help transit agencies convert to electricity. But it was at the margins because, as I said, we didn't have the money that we had until the very end, where we were basically brought back up to a steady state kind of budget, which is really not fulfilling the transportation needs that people expect of us. But we were able to do some things at the edges, which I think our Democratic members of the House were very proud of, particularly with respect to opportunities for disadvantaged communities.
So, Jake, when you say it came down to the end, I mean, that's what my brain heard you say. I thought, man, talk about sleepless nights. It's like, here it is, moment by moment by moment. And in addition to that, we want our audience to also know that, yes, you have a vested interest in transportation, but you also have constituents that have their own issues and own special projects and legislation that they want you to hop on board with. So what legislation did you champion this session?
I didn't have a lot of bills myself. I gave them to other members of my committee in particular to shepherd through the process, because I knew it was going to be a tough way to do business and a tough year on budget. So the focus of all three of us in the 27th district was obviously on the capital budgets and projects. So I think you're familiar with the Arlington Drive homeless facility. We've got operating money for that particular work and for the Shiloh Baptist housing project and for Terra project up on the hilltop. So we all worked together, each taking a project or two to advance it through the process and make sure that we had things for our district that were funded.
I love that you've mentioned that, because later on in the show, we're going to have Tacoma Housing Authority Executive Director Michael Mira on, as he is saying goodbye to us, and we all have to go. Do you really have to go after all this time? So you have been in the public's eye, you've been in the public service for years. And I think people have a misconception about, even though the legislator is considered part-time, which you are, your work does not stop at the end of the season, does it, Jake?
No, in fact, because we still have a shortfall in our transportation needs and some obligations that we have for replacing culverts, building a new bridge across the Columbia River, and other other projects, and changing the kinds of transportation options to more fully fund transit and bike ped and that type of investments. We're working on, our members are working towards hopefully maybe a special session late this year to address those transportation needs. So we already are full on in our meetings and meeting with stakeholders to see if we can arrive at something that's going to be acceptable with the House, the Senate, and with both political parties.
Wow, and you say that so easily, but that is no mean feat. So as you are, preparing for perhaps a special session and thinking about bipartisanship, who are your political heroes? Who inspires you on those days when you're like, I'm done? Because we all have those days, regardless of what we do.
Well, it would probably take quite a while to describe this relationship, but as a young person growing up in Port Angeles after my father had passed away, there was a family friend and political science instructor. His name was Dr. Werner Klost up in Port Angeles. He was chair actually of the Republican Party up there, and later became a city council member in Port Angeles. And he was an example to me on the political side of the importance, and he got me engaged in political activity. But he also took on my mother as a special service to her since the time that when I was growing up. My mother never learned to drive. And so he would chauffeur us around to all the different kinds of things that were important in daily lives, including my, extracurricular activities until I was old enough to drive. So it was more than just a political thing. It was about caring about people and providing the kind of help they need in order to survive, as in our case, in a very difficult situation, which had obviously had very much a lot of meaning to me over the many, many years that I've been in public service.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a beautiful role model of service before self. Because that, in my opinion, has got to be tattooed across your heart someplace if you're going to sit in the position you're in and put in the kind of hours that you put in. Last but not least, let's talk about how do our constituents get in touch with you? I mean, we've been showing your email across your face the whole time, but is there a more personal way that they can get in touch with you?
Well, I not everybody does this, but I give out my personal cell phone, and I do have constituents, happy and unhappy, call me with issues that are concerning. So that number is 253-383-5908. People can also get a hold of me through our legislative hotline or calling our legislative phone number, which is 360-786-7974. And of course, obviously there's a standard letter writing and emails, but any way that they can. And I think both all the district representatives and Senator Darnell, all three of us, I think, are going to be doing some meetings in the community this interim to have conversations with people, talk about what's on their mind in a more individual or group fashion.
Well, that's my door you just opened up, because after you have those conversations, I'm going to come chase after you and have you come back and sit with me and tell me how they went. Deal?
Okay.
All right. Mr. Jake Fye, thank you so much for your time, for your effort, for your ministry of what you do and how you view transportation. And I pray that you get some rest and get some time to enjoy this summer.
Well, thank you, Amanda, and all the great work you do with bringing these public issues to the forefront for folks to get more information and help them make their own decisions about what their priorities are. So thank you for your work, too.
Well, my pleasure. We have much more to come on Cityline. We're going to take a quick break. Don't go away. We'll be right back.